Mr. President, Chairman Dempsey, Lilibet, and Ziller, I know it's been hard raising your father and your husband, but you've done a pretty good job. And Chuck, there's no one I know who, and I mean this sincerely, we've been friends, close friends for a long time. There's no one I know who better fits the standard that President Kennedy set out for our generation when he said, "Our success or failure will be measured by the answer to 4 questions. Were we truly men of courage? Were we truly men of judgment? Were we truly men of integrity? Were we truly men of dedication?" Well, Chuck, there's a lot more than your physical courage that I admired. It's your moral courage and political courage. You have more of that than about anyone I've ever served with in all the years I've served in the United States Senate as Vice President. And Chuck, you're a man whose judgment and counsel I've always sought, to your chagrin sometimes. During our 12 years together in the Foreign Relations Committee, the many tens of thousands of miles we traveled around the world into northern Iraq at a time when before we went in. And excuse me, Mr. President, I'll tell a quick story. We wanted to go into Erbil, and we couldn't figure out how to get there. This is before the wars commenced, and so the Turks decided to let us through, and we were on the border, and they decided to stick us in a car with a guy who looked like something out of one of these modern day road warrior movies. We were both sitting in the back seat. They told us for a couple-hour drive, make sure you lie down in the seat as often as you can because you don't want to be seen. And I remember Chuck saying, I'm worried about my mom. We're riding through the mountains of in northern Kurdistan, and you're on the phone. You got the cell phone and called your mother. But it's a pretty interesting fellow, Mr. President, who's on an important mission, but never forgets what was important to him. And your integrity, Chuck, is something that everyone in the United States Senate with whom you worked, everyone in the previous administrations you've worked with, recognized, and it's recognizable immediately. You always mean what you said. You said what you mean. And in my neighborhood and yours, a promise made is a promise kept. You cannot find anyone who's ever known you where you have ever not kept whatever commitment you've made. And your dedication to this country and your family goes without having to even make reference to. And Chuck, your experience as a fellow warrior to all your comrades here has established an unusual bond between you and enlisted troops. I remember we were down in Basra. Everybody else was talking to the generals, and I look around, where are you? You're over climbing in a Humvee with 2 sergeants, asking them what's going on, what the problem is. I remember us being in Baghdad. I remember us being in Afghanistan. Always walking away and talking to the rank and file troops because they knew it, they understood it. You got the straight scoop. And you've also known, Chuck, which is, I think, not unique, but critically important, something the President understands and has exemplified, that we not only lead the world by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. You've understood to your core that America's power and prestige ultimately rests upon the men and women in uniform that are assembled here today and others. And you feel, as I do, as all of us do in here, we have a lot of obligations as a country, but we only have one truly sacred obligation. Literally one sacred. We have obligations to the needy, to the elderly, to those to educate our children, but only one truly sacred obligation. That is, equip those who we send to war and care for them and their families while and when they come home from war. And no one has been more committed to fulfilling that obligation than you. Chuck, I'm truly going to personally miss you. I'm going to miss your presence here. And I'm sure, though, that no one in this auditorium misunderstands the depth of your service, the sacrifices you made, and the friendships you made. And so, Chuck, thank you for all you've done. And a point of personal privilege, you used to say in the Senate, all you've done for me, all you've done for the country. I'm proud to call you a friend, and I'm proud to stand by you as the Secretary of Defense about to retire. And as the President said, being from Nebraska, you could have been the Secretary of Agriculture. You wouldn't have gotten any of this. No. Congratulations, Chuck. I wish you and Lilibet and Ziller and Alan all the very, very best. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Michelle and I, as some of you know, just spent the past few days in India. I returned about 3 o'clock this morning. So I don't know exactly what time it is or what day it is, but I was determined to be here with you this afternoon to honor and celebrate a great friend to me and to all of us. In October of 1967, President Lyndon Johnson traveled to a military base in New Mexico to review a top-secret weapons program. And he went down to the White Sands Missile Range and out to the testing grounds. There, out in the desert, the President watched as soldiers demonstrated what would later become the famed Stinger missile. And one of those soldiers was a 21-year-old private from Nebraska named Charles Timothy Hagel. Now, the Secret Service does not usually let me get too close to an active weapons system. It makes them nervous. But clearly they did things a little differently back in LBJ's days. And Chuck, I can only assume you were careful not to point the missile at the President, because what followed was a life of dedicated service to our nation spanning nearly 50 years. Vice President Biden, members of Congress, General Dempsey, leaders from across this department, members of the Joint Chiefs and service secretaries, to the men and women of the greatest military in the world, we gather to pay tribute to a true American patriot. And let me assure you that I checked with the Secret Service, and Chuck will not be demonstrating any missile launchers today. As we all know, and we've heard again, Chuck loves Nebraska. The Cornhuskers, red beer, Runzas, I don't know what those are, but I hear they taste pretty good. But above all, what Chuck loves most about his home state is the people, his fellow Midwesterners. There are just under 2 million people in Nebraska. There are more than 7 billion people on the planet. But as so many of our troops have found out themselves, no matter where Chuck goes in the world, If you are from Nebraska, he will find you. And he'll talk with you and listen to you and ask you about your family back home, and chances are he knows them too. So today is a celebration of a quintessentially American life, a man from the heartland who devoted his life to America. Just imagine in your mind's eye the defining moments of his life. The kid from Nebraska who, as Marty said, volunteered to go to Vietnam. The soldier outside Saigon rushing to pull his own brother from a burning APC. The deputy at the VA who stood up for his fellow Vietnam vets who were exposed to Agent Orange. The senator who helped lead the fight for the post-9/11 GI Bill to give this generation of heroes the same opportunities that he had. I asked Chuck to lead this department at a moment of profound transition, and today we express our gratitude for the progress under his watch. After more than 13 years, our combat mission in Afghanistan is over, and America's longest war has come to a responsible and honorable end. Because of Chuck's direction, a strategic review has made difficult choices in a time of tight budgets, while still making sure that our forces are ready to be called on for any contingency. Today, our troops are supporting Afghan forces. They continue to face risks, and they remain relentless in their pursuit of al-Qaeda networks. They're leading the coalition to destroy ISIL, a coalition that includes Arab nations in no small measure because Chuck strengthened key partnerships in the Middle East. And under his leadership, our forces in West Africa are helping to lead the global fight against Ebola, saving lives and showing American leadership at its very, very best. Even as we've met these pressing challenges, Chuck has helped us to prepare for the century ahead. In Europe, a stronger NATO is reassuring our allies. In the Asia-Pacific, one of my foreign policy priorities, Chuck helped modernize our alliances, strengthen partnerships, bolster defense posture, improve communications between the United States and Chinese militaries, all of which helps to ensure that the United States remains a strong Pacific power. Because Chuck helped build new trust, we'll expand our defense cooperation with India. I just demonstrated during my visit there the degree to which that partnership is moving in a new direction. That's partly attributable to work that Chuck did. And the reforms he launched will help make this department more efficient and innovative for years to come. Thanks to Secretary Hagel's guiding hand, this institution is better positioned for the future. But Chuck, I want to suggest today that perhaps your greatest impact, a legacy that will be felt for decades to come, has been your own example. It's not simply that you've been the first enlisted combat veteran and the first Vietnam veteran to serve as Secretary of Defense. It's how your life experience, being down in the mud, feeling the bullets fly overhead, has allowed you to connect with our troops like no other secretary before you. You've welcomed our junior enlisted personnel to lunch in your office and made them feel at home. And they told you what was really on their minds. When you spoke to our newest sergeant majors about the true meaning of leadership and responsibility, they knew they were learning from one of their own. And in those quiet moments, when you've pinned a Purple Heart on a wounded warrior, you were there not just as Secretary of Defense, but as an old Army sergeant who knows the wages of war and still carries the shrapnel in your chest. Now, these aren't fleeting moments. They reflect the driving force of Chuck Hagel's service, his love of our troops, and his determination to take care of them after more than 13 years of war. Today, our military hospitals are getting stronger. Our women are more integrated into the force than ever before. We're making progress in combating sexual assault. We'll bring home the remains of fallen heroes faster, and more Vietnam veterans will finally be eligible for the disability pay they deserved all along. And Chuck, that's because of you. That's part of your legacy. Of course, I'm grateful to Chuck on a very personal level. Exactly 10 years ago this month, I joined you in the United States Senate, along with the Vice President. I was new and green. You were a veteran legislator. I was the student, and you shared some of the lessons of your service. I was young, and you were, well, and though we came from different parties, we often saw the world the same way, including our conviction that even as we must never hesitate to defend our nation, we must never rush into war. We both believed that America should only send her sons and daughters into harm's way when it is absolutely necessary, and when we do, we make sure they've got everything that they need to succeed. We've got a mission that is worthy of their sacrifice. You know, in an era of politics that too often descends into spectacle, you've always served with decency and dignity. And in a town of outsized egos, you've never lost your Midwestern humility. You've always been frank and honest and said what you thought. And I have so profoundly benefited from that candor. You represent a tradition of bipartisanship in national security that we need more of today. And Joe Biden reflects that. I see Dick Lugar in the stands. He reflects that. That's when we're at our best. From sergeant to secretary, you've always been guided by one interest: what you believe is best for America. And I thank you for your friendship and your counsel. And all of us thank you for your character and your integrity. Of course, nobody serves alone. Lilibet, Alan, Ziller, thank you for sharing your husband and father with us, and for the sacrifices that your family's made for all of ours. And Chuck, since our lives are so often the reflection of those closest to us, today I also want to acknowledge the service of your brother Tom, the World War II service of your father Charles, the sacrifices of your late mom, Betty, who worked day and night to raise her 4 sons. We salute this American family. Our men and women in uniform here today, those who stand where Chuck once stood, they don't ask for much. They volunteered. They accept the risks that come with military service. But they do ask this: that this nation take care of them as well as they've taken care of us. That we provide them with the resources to do their jobs and meet the missions that we ask of them. After all that they've given for us, after all that they've sacrificed, they have the right to expect that we will meet our obligations as well. And that's my duty as Commander-in-Chief, and this will be the work of my nominee to be the next Secretary of Defense, Mr. Ash Carter. This must be the work of all of us, as Americans grateful to those who serve in our name. And that's the story of Chuck Hagel's life. I'll close with a story that came about last year. I was going to tell the story about when we were traveling in Iraq, and Chuck wore these pair of sort of hush-puppy bedroom slipper shoes out into the desert, and the flaps started opening up and his toes were sticking out, but I'm going to skip that story. He then ended up buying me a pair, which I have never worn, I'm proud to say. This is a different story. One day last year, I was in the Oval Office, and Chuck came in for what I thought would be our regular weekly meeting, but he had a guest, and he introduced us. And his name was Jerome Skip Johnson, friendly guy, grandfather, and he was from my hometown of Chicago. And Chuck explained that Skip, Lieutenant Johnson, had been his platoon commander in Vietnam, but they had lost touch until Chuck tracked him down. This was the first time they had reunited in nearly 50 years. And Chuck just wanted to bring Skip to the Oval Office to say hello to the President, to meet his family, including his young grandsons. And Chuck told me about how it had been 1968 with protests and race riots back home causing tensions among our troops in Vietnam. And Chuck's unit was mostly white, but Skip is African American. And as the platoon commander, he was not going to tolerate division or distrust. And he went to his men and made himself clear, we are all Americans. We're going to live together. We're going to take care of each other. We're fighting together. We're going to get each other's backs. Let's get it done. And at that moment in the Oval Office, as these two soldiers stood before me, with Skip's grandsons looking on, it wasn't lost on any of us how far our nation has come. And I want to thank Chuck for that moment, because part of the reason we've traveled that distance is we've had men like Chuck Hagel serving and representing what's best in America. In moments when we are tested as a military, as a nation, sometimes we get distracted by what divides us and lose sight of what unites us. And at those moments, we can draw strength from the example of a sergeant from Nebraska and a lieutenant from Chicago. We are all Americans. We live together. We sacrifice together. We take care of each other. Sometimes we have to fight together. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce to you my friend, our 24th Secretary of Defense, and an outstanding American, Mr. Chuck Hagel.
Thank you. It's about enough. It's enough. Thank you. Actually, I think we can all go home now. Mr. President, thank you. I'm very grateful to you for many reasons. First, thank you for being here today. I know the kind of schedule that you have been on and the length of the trip, the intensity of those visits, and to make this effort today means an awful lot. Thank you. I want to also thank you for giving me the honor of serving you and the American people as Secretary of Defense. I will always be grateful, always grateful for that opportunity. And Mr. President, thank you for your strong leadership at a very difficult time in our world that requires wise, steady, careful leadership. You have and you are providing that leadership, and I have been very proud to serve with you in the Senate, in particular over the last 2 years as your Secretary of Defense. Vice President Biden, thank you as well for being here today. I have not forgotten some of the stories that you told. I recall very well us calling my mother on that trip through the mountains of Iraq, and I remember you wanted to speak with her. And hours later, she never forgot that, Mr. Vice President, and was so proud of that phone conversation. And so I thank you for your generous reaching out to my mother at a very difficult time for her, because she was gone about a month later. So thank you. One of my greatest joys during my time here in Washington has been development of our friendship. And as you have noted and the President has noted, our time together, the three of us on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Secretary Kerry is here today, who knows a little something about this business. And to you, Secretary Kerry, thank you. I include you in those days. Our former chairman, Chairman Lugar, is here as well, and to Dick Lugar, thank you. As you have noted, there are special people in our lives that we benefit from, and certainly Dick Lugar is one of those. I think that we all have benefited a great deal from. And Vice President Biden, thank you for your years of service to this country as well. Chairman Dempsey, it's been a great privilege for this old sergeant to have worked side by side with a general of your character and your courage. I've been very fortunate to have you as my partner in this job, especially during those self-help and educational opportunities called congressional hearings. I was always reassured in each of those hearings as we would drive to the Hill in the morning, knowing that Marty Dempsey was next to me. And for what you have meant to our military, Marty, and what you continue to do for this country, thank you very much. I see another great icon of the United States Senate with us today, Senator John Warner, who we all worked closely with and benefited from, and to our distinguished colleagues, Senators Warner and Lugar, welcome and thank you for what you've done for this country, as so many of you here today. And I'm grateful that you would take the time to visit us on this occasion. To the chiefs of the services, our senior civilian leaders, and the combatant commanders, thank you. Thank you for your unflagging service and your leadership and your commitment to this country. I want to particularly acknowledge Bob Work. Bob Work, our Deputy Secretary of Defense. I thank him for his leadership and our strong partnership over the last year. And my appreciation as well to Ash Carter for Ash's service and his partnership during my first year at the Pentagon, and for his continued commitment to public service. And my heartfelt thanks to my security and advanced staff. Each of you played critically important roles for which my family and I will always be grateful. To my personal staff and those in the office of the Secretary, you've been indispensable in helping me carry out my responsibilities, and I thank you. And to the men and women who serve our country and their families, whose service and sacrifice is unequaled, you have my deepest gratitude. We salute your high purpose in defense of our freedoms and our values. Every day you wake up and you go to work knowing that this department alone is charged with one fundamental mission: the security of this nation. It's been my absolute privilege to have been on your team. Over the past 2 years, I've witnessed the courage and dignity of America's servicemen and women all over the world. I've seen young enlisted and young officers do their jobs, realizing that how they do their jobs is just as important as the job itself. I've seen senior officers and senior enlisted realizing that their role models may be their highest responsibility of all. And I've seen the enduring devotion and commitment of their families, the mothers, the fathers, husbands, wives, children, and the sacrifices that they willingly make for our country. Their individual commitment to the greater good and strength of the institution has been a complete inspiration to me in every way. They understand that it's people who build and strengthen institutions and make the world a better place. These are the reasons why America's military is the most admired and most trusted institution in our country. We must always protect that confidence and trust by our conduct and our performance, continuing to hold ourselves and each other to the highest standards of professionalism and personal behavior. As I will soon leave this job that I have cherished for the last 2 years, I want you all to know that the things that I have most respected and most admired are your dignity, your courage, and your dedication. The opportunity to have been part of all this is something I could not have imagined when I joined the Army 48 years ago. No high office with responsibility is easy, as everyone in this room knows. But with each difficult challenge comes the satisfaction of knowing that you are like Teddy Roosevelt's man in the arena, slugging it out, doing what you believe, doing what you like, and doing it your way. And recognizing that it's not the critics who count or change the world or make the world better. Rather, it's those who are willing to work very hard toward building a better world. We live in a complicated and defining time. The men and women who have devoted their lives to America's security are the architects of this new 21st century world. They're building onto the great legacies and foundations that have been laid by those who have gone before them. We've made mistakes. We will make more mistakes. But we hold tightly to one of America's greatest strengths, the capacity and the constitutional structure that allows us to self-correct. We can change systems, right wrongs, solve problems, and start over. But we must get the big things right. We must recognize that there is not an immediate answer to every problem. Some problems require evolving solutions that give us the time and the space to adjust and the patience to seek higher ground and lasting results. Our world, captive to immediacy, uncertainty, and complexity, is not moving toward less complicated problems, but rather toward more global challenges rooted in historic injustices and conflicts. In this dynamic environment, we need to prioritize and focus on how to build greater partnership capacity around the world with our partners, to help solve problems through coalitions of common interests that help build opportunities and create hope for all people. These are difficult and complicated tasks, but we have no choice. It will require steady, wise, and judicious use of American power, prestige, and influence. We must never fail to always ask the most important question when making decisions in policy. What happens next? With all of the world's travails and problems, it is still a hopeful world. This I believe. I want to thank my wife, Lilibet, with whom I have shared this remarkable 30-year journey. I could never have done this job without her by my side. And I'm especially proud of her work on behalf of military families and other important issues to the men and women of the military. I valued all of her many contributions to this institution, and I thank her deeply for helping me be a better Secretary of Defense. I want to also thank my daughter, Allen, my son, Ziller, for their constant support, encouragement, and always good advice, and helping me with the internet. and recognizing and allowing me to take inventory in that recognition that I am not near as smart as I thought I was. Those are the humbling experiences of parenthood. Those of us who've had the opportunity to know those days and have that experience and be blessed with that experience know so well. And to my brothers Tom and Mike, who have truly been with me since this train left the station in Nebraska many years ago. Thank you. And one last point. Of all the opportunities my life has given me, and I have been blessed with so many, I am most proud of having once been a soldier. The lessons from my time in uniform about trust, responsibility, duty, judgment, and loyalty to your fellow soldier. These I have carried with me throughout my life. May God bless and keep each of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.